So Hare Krishna, welcome to the March Urban Devi Sangha. My name is Andrea. For those of you who are new or don't know me, I help facilitate this beautiful Sangha with our dear Rukmini Walker. And today our guest speaker is Brajarani Devi Dasi, and she's going to be speaking on Bhakti, the cherry on top. And little description about what she will be talking about. She says, many of us have followed other spiritual paths, finding Bhakti. And for some of us, Bhakti can be the missing piece in a life of service and devotion. How does one Bhakta make sense of it all? So a little bit about Brajarani Devi Dasi. Some of us do know her. She actually used to be the one to facilitate and do what I am doing right now. But for those of you who don't, for more than 30 years, Brajarani has served, taught, and mentored in the corporate and nonprofit world and in spiritual communities of the African Diaspora. She turned to the path of Bhakti to deepen her commitment and love of service. And there she found her spiritual teacher, Radhanath Swami. And, oh, sorry, I lost my, there we go. So Radhanath Swami, I guess Krishna really wanted us to focus on Radhanath Swami's name for a second. And he was like, stop, I can't find your bio. So many obeisances to Maharaj. And she also found a community dedicated to loving service to the divine and to other living beings. As a priest in several spiritual traditions, including Bhakti and Lucumi, which I may be mispronouncing, and if I did, please correct me, Radharani. She serves as a coach. She serves as a coach and spiritual mentor while desiring to build an interfaith community in New York City. So welcome, dear Brajarani. We're so very happy to have you here. So please take it. The floor is yours.
I got to do something here because all of a sudden, all I'm looking at is myself.
Sorry, yeah, you can change it to gallery view. I just spotlighted it as per the instructions I got from you.
Okay, that was very helpful, but it's a bit much. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Andrea, for this savor that you're doing. Thank you so much. Rukmini Devi Dasi, who befriended me from the very beginning of this Bhakti path. Appreciate this. I feel a little unqualified to speak, and so please bear with me and forgive me if there's anything that I need to be forgiven for in advance. This is a topic that Rukmini has encouraged me to speak on, and as she will say, I was quite hesitant at first to speak, particularly on this, and she has really been my encourager and great wisher. And what I'm going to speak about is a lot about my own experience. That's probably really uncomfortable for me to do so. So I'm just going to put that out front for you all. I hope that there's something you have to say helpful for this. So my topic is Bhakti as the cherry on the cake. That implies that one still has the cake. So it's not just Bhakti, the cherry, but it's the cherry on the cake. And so integrate. Turning 61 on Wednesday.
Brajarani, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but we're getting a lot of messages saying that your audio is coming out distorted. Perhaps, is there any way that you could put in maybe a microphone or headphones? Would that help?
Is it still distorted now?
Can
That's
you
better.
That's better. I don't know what changed.
Oh, I know what changed.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. So sorry about that.
So I'm talking to you. I saw something over here that I was reading. I think I put it too close and put it over the sound. So I'm sorry about that. So I start again, Carmenia says, okay. So I started by just thanking Andrea and Rukmini and saying how it's a little difficult to be talking and talking about myself, and so Rukmini has really my ever well wisher since the beginning of this Bhakti path, has encouraged me to speak, so speak I will. So my topic is Bhakti as the cherry on the cake. And so the cherry on the cake implies that one actually still has the cake. It's not just the cherry. So as Andrea read the description, it's really about sort of how do I integrate this life? I'm going to be 61 next Wednesday coming up. And so how does all of this in Bhakti, my experience with Bhakti is probably only the last, I'd say 2017 is when I met the devotees, and it's now 2020, so 6 years. So all the years before that, I had other spiritual practices and learnings. And so how do I think about and how do I integrate this? And so this is an ongoing practice or pursuit for me. So I'm going to read something from the Bhagavad Gita, because I think where this all starts is with the family that I grew into. And so in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, verse 37, Arjuna says, "O Krishna, what is the destination of the unsuccessful transcendentalist who in the beginning takes to the process of self-realization with faith, but who later desists due to worldly mindedness and thus does not attain perfection in mysticism? O mighty armed Krishna, does not such a man who is bewildered from the path of transcendence fall away from both spiritual and material success and perish like a ribbon cloud with no position in any sphere? This is my doubt, O Krishna, and I ask you to dispel it completely. But for you, no one is to be found who can destroy this doubt." The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "Son of Pritha, a transcendentalist engaged in auspicious activities does not meet with destruction either in this world or in the spiritual world. One who does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil. This unsuccessful yogi, after many, many years of enjoyment on the planets of the pious living entities, is born into a family of righteous people or into a family of rich aristocracy. Or, if unsuccessful after such a long practice of yoga, he takes his birth in a family of transcendentalists who are surely great in wisdom. Certainly such a birth is rare in this world. On taking such a birth, he revives the divine consciousness of his previous life, and he again tries to make further progress in order to achieve complete success, O son of Kuru." One of the things I love about the Bhagavad Gita is like it's full of these amazing promises that Krishna makes to us. And this one, which is that no matter what we do or how far we get in any given life, that spiritual progress goes with us into the next one. So I am the fifth of 6 children, and I was born in 1962. My parents had already been, the words that they would use would be saved at a Billy Graham crusade in the late 1950s. And that means that they gave their hearts and their lives to Jesus. They were committed to serving God in their lives and to having a personal relationship with Jesus as God. And so this is one of my birthrights, basically, is seeing God as a person with whom one can have a relationship. Interesting, I don't think I was at that time really clear that this was one of my birthrights, but as I come around, it also becomes, all of how this all comes together is really kind of interesting. One of my services at the Bhakti Center is to lead a group called Soul Talks. And Soul Talks are people who are spiritual seekers who have, who are completely new to Bhakti. And recently someone asked me when I became so sure that God existed and that God was a person. And the reality is, in this lifetime, I've never not been sure. I'm not sure I can actually help someone who's like not sure, because I've never gone through a process of how did I become sure. And I think part of this is this birthright, being born into this very pious family and and the birthright from whatever previous lives that I had. So over time, my parents' commitment showed up in a number of different ways. They were always serving others. We would have families, women with their children who would stay with us for extended periods of time who were escaping abusive relationships. And they would just come live with us. I was like 6, 7, 8, and it'd be a family in one of our bedrooms, just kind of like living and hiding out in some ways. My family my parents met in a glee club, which is sort of singing together. And so we always sang. And so we would be out on the streets preaching and singing. And I have to say, it embarrassed me. I hated it. And I really, really, really hated it. But fascinatingly enough, it's actually one of the things that I do for the Bhakti Center is actually do Harinam. So it's really quite amazing how all of these things connect over time. So my father became an ordained minister. He never had his own church, but he was always kind of the number 2 person in the church. And he was a biblical scholar and a teacher. They lived by faith. So if there were things that we needed, like a car or something like that, and we didn't have the money for it, they would pray, and cars would come. People would give us cars that could fit a family of 8. So I got to see this sort of in action in my life. We also spent long hours at church. Sundays, we'd leave the house at 7 a.m. and not get back till like 9 p.m. I did not like that either. And we would spend long hours on our knees in prayer. And I got to say, I didn't love that either. There was no opt out for us as children. And later in my spiritual life, as I ended up mentoring other people and other mothers, it was really important for me that children have some ability to say, I want to do this or I don't want to do this, so they end up embracing something as opposed to feeling so completely forced in the way that I was for so much of the time. So, and then my father very strongly believed in spare the rod or spoil the child. I'm not going to go into that, just imagine what very strongly might mean. So although this was a practice of surfing and preaching, it wasn't really love focused, not as I have come to find with Bhakti. In my teen years, it became really clear that this wasn't the path I could follow. One, because of the spare the rod, spoil the child bit. And I couldn't connect to this idea that you had to know Jesus in order to be saved. And if you didn't actually ever hear that name, you were going to be in hell for eternity. And this idea of this sort of eternal hell and eternal damnation was a challenge for me. That, as well as it was sort of a guilt trip in the family of, you got to do this because Jesus died for your sins. And it's like, whoa, that's like deep. That's like really deep. So in my teen years, I basically had a big sort of coming out of Christianity conversation with my family. And then I drifted spiritually for a while, not knowing how to move forward. I'd hear little bits of something that I would be like, okay, that makes sense to me and that feels like truth, but there wasn't anything that held it together in any way that made sense to me. And I still had this fear that somehow if I didn't turn back to the religion of my families, that I would be in hell for eternity. So I enter again the Bhagavad Gita, just because I love it. Chapter 7, verse 16, it says, "Oh, best among the Bharats, 4 kinds of pious men begin to render devotional service unto me: the distressed, the desire of wealth, the inquisitive, and he who is searching for knowledge of the absolute. And Krishna has used distress. Distress is the way that any major shift in my spiritual path has come because of distress. So this first initial one was in my late 20s, and I went through a breakup at that time that I really didn't think I was going to survive. I don't know, like, I don't think anyone's really died of being broken up with, but when you're 28, it just really feels like it's like the end of the world. And so I went for a spiritual reading at the time, and it helped me understand some things about my life and helped me move forward. And I began to embrace that practice because it was helpful to me. And because I think, and then Rukmini would say this, and I think my mom said this at my initiation here, that this bent towards service has always existed. I worked in nonprofits, I did HR, it's always been a sort of, and it comes again, it's another one of my birthrights from my family. And so I wanted to use my whatever spiritual practice I embraced to help others. And so I dedicated my life to that. In 1990, I was initiated into the mysteries of what I will call the Orisha tradition or the Lucumi tradition, which comes to the United States by way of Cuba and Puerto Rico, but comes from Nigeria. It was really in some way brought by people who were enslaved from the Yoruba people into to the West. Briefly, Orishas are forces of nature. In Bhakti sense or cosmology, we call them sort of demigods. They've been given areas of life by God that we can go to. For example, there's one who represents motherhood, and she's over, what happens? She's over there, she's Yamaya. There's one who represents medicine and doctors, another who represents the crossroads and choice. And when people have material challenges in their life, they go to these Orishas who've been given the ability to assist them in those ways. And it's really similar. Rukmini was asking me earlier about sort of the Vedic cosmology, so these icons, these sort of, I think you can see across many different, almost every pantheon has sort of these similar icons because it's about the human. They help us with our human existence. But really, essentially, Orishas do what God wills them to do and what God gives them the ability to do. The one I'm initiated to is named Oshun. She is associated with the river and fresh water, with women and fertility, with blood that runs through our veins. The spiritual essence, if we were thinking that there's something particularly a female experience of spirituality, that would be from her. Love, kinship, beauty, culture, society, all of those things are associated with her, the ways in which we are connected to each other. And there's a story about her when she was really young, and humanity had turned away from God. And she went up to God, who in this tradition is called Olodumare, and interceded on behalf of humanity to have some mercy on people who were getting their just desserts. Yes. I see a message from Kamania. Actually, I'm going to try to click over to that. I'm not good at this sort of seeing messages and talking at the same time. But yes, thank you. So it's a deep practice. So it is a monotheistic. What's really important is, although you hear mostly about the Orishas, it is a monotheistic tradition. There is God, and then there are these entities, these Orishas who serve God. But in the US, as it comes to be, the practice is more focused on the Orishas. It's more focused on material life. It's more focused on getting what I need to survive, or getting what I need in my life. And that's really how the practice has evolved. So although it's monotheistic, theistic God, Olodumare, is actually somewhat distant. We have a lot of things that we know to do with these orishas, and not a lot of what we do with God in particular. But it's also a really deep practice of service. Long hours of service to the orishas and service to others. That's also built into it. And so as a priest of Oshun, I've been honored to help others and to lead others on their spiritual path, which is what I wanted to do. As an aside, during that first year of my initiation, which was in 1990, I met Christians who dedicated their life to God and love. And in a really open and non-judgmental way. And they saw what I was going through. They were very curious about it. They weren't like, oh, that's, sort of devil worship or anything like that. They were really, and if I had grown up experiencing Christianity through their lens, we probably wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here with you. But that wasn't Krishna's plan. So I am actually here with you. So in 2016, 2017 was the second sort of major crisis in my life. And in that crisis was somehow I came to the limits of what I could control. So when you do a practice that gives you things at your fingertips that can like make things happen, then when you find you can't make something happen, all of a sudden you're like, And this was the US political reality in 2016, 2017. And I had not been one who had been very interested in politics up until that moment. I'd been very focused on work and this spiritual practice and not very engaged. And I got very, very engaged in 2016. And the election didn't turn out the way that I had hoped it would, no matter how hard I tried, no matter how much money I gave to it, no matter how many phone calls I made and phone banks and all that kind of stuff. I just couldn't control it. And I watched in 2017, I watched others in my spiritual community also, like myself, be a little unmoored with the reality around them, ungrounded. And not able to find a source of comfort in our spirituality in the midst of it. And I had been fond up until then of telling my godchildren about how the Dalai Lama somehow manages to be joyful and at peace in the midst of being in exile and his people experiencing such persecution, and he's at peace, and the joy, you can see his joy is like, coming up from the wells up from inside him in the midst of all of this. But I could not find that joy or that peace in 2017. And so Krishna entered and again shifted my path. So I'd come across the Maha Mantra a couple of decades before. I had gone to a retreat and was doing a yin yoga class and and I was in Hanumanasana, and there they were. And because yin yoga, if any of you have ever done it, it's like long periods of time. I think we were like 6 minutes in a posture, right? So like they keep you busy and keep you focused by talking to you. And so I was telling us stories about Hanuman. And in the background, Krishna Das was singing about Hanuman. And I walked out of that, I was like, I don't know what that was, but like, I love this monkey guy. And I absolutely, whoever that was singing, I want to figure out who that was. And so I went and found Krishna Das albums, and that's how I first came across the Maha Mantra. And I think of Krishna Das as the gateway drug to Bhakti. Somehow I know many people who that's how they first really came in contact with the Maha Mantra was through him. So I went to kirtans, etc. And it was really just kind of enjoying. I'd sing, I'd have in the background, etc. Just kind of, just sort of, enjoying it, and then a few years later, in 2007, about 10 years before I took to the Bhakti path, I somehow came across the term Bhakti. And it must have been related to Hanuman in some way, shape, or form. I don't remember. And it was described as devotion and service. And I don't think I walked away very much with the sense of this connection to God. And I'm not sure I knew who Ram was in all of this. But again, like, these concepts that really feel like truth, sort of Krishna just puts them in my path, and I'm like, yes, that. I don't know what else this is, but that. And of course, I'm trying to do it on my own. So I am trying to figure out how to explore devotion and service within my relationships. And I was in a relationship with this guy at the time, and sort of like leaned into sort of what does this look like to really serve another person and be devoted to another person. And God was not at the center of that. God needed to be at the center of that. God was not at the center of that. So it seems so strange now. Now on this path of Bhakti, it really feels very strange to be thinking about Bhakti and not have Krishna, God by any name at the center of it. So in 2017, again, so here I was, I am a little bit unmoored. I'm in distress again. And my community and people around me, people I love, are in distress because of the sort of political situation. Things go up, things go down. This is life. And I left work early one day and walked by. There's people that do Harinam, that sing Maha Mantra. At that time, it was every day in the afternoon in Union Square when the weather permitted. And so I gotten off work early. I saw them. I knew the Maha Mantra because I've been singing with Krishna Das, so I loved it. I knew it. And so I stopped to sing with these people. And this beautiful soul walked up to me and gave me some books. And that was my first copy of the Bhagavad Gita. Not this one, it was a soft-covered one, but the Bhagavad Gita, The Science of Self-Realization, and Chant and Be Happy. Those were the first three books that I walked away with. The devotee, her name is Divyangi Dasi. She's a disciple of Vaisheshika Prabhu, and a very, very, very dear friend. My first guru is what I will call her. And with this was connecting the mantra to philosophy. I went on vacation somewhere. I was reading it. I had been trying to stop drinking. I didn't drink a lot, but I wanted to drink less. And I found myself like unable to control, again, back to really finding the limits of my ability to control. And so I started reading and just stopped drinking. I just stopped and I was in Costa Rica by myself and found Srila Prabhupada chanting the Maha Mantra on YouTube, and just started chanting along with him for like an hour a day, just sitting overlooking the rainforest. And so what this did was explain this bhakti yoga that I'd heard about and been trying to dabble in, and this philosophy of love and service at the heart, and really importantly, sort of transcending our false ego, and all the ways that we think about ourselves to divide us from each other, and that are not our true selves. And this piece of the philosophy was really, really important, and I'll get back to why it's really, really very essential. Now, I don't actually think it's not necessarily unique. You see love at the center, I think, of most spiritual traditions when you break them down to what they actually are and what's most important to them, right? The challenge is we lose focus. We start focusing on what is the less important, the less essential, right? So Jesus said, love God and love your neighbor as yourself, that this is the heart of his teachings. And yet you don't always see that in people, that they understand that they're living this as the heart of the teaching. So you see this, and yet, so the concepts of hell and the culture wars and all those seem to be more the heart of the teachings than love. And so Krishna Bhakti has brought back into my life also this personal God. So growing up with a personal God, being involved in this Lucumi practice where the personal relationship was more with the Orishas than it was with God, who was a little more distant, to then coming sort of full circle Bhakti, the cherry, bringing God back close again. And so that has been, but I also find this ability to drift away from the core is really easy for all of us. It feels like it's one of our human issues. So it's not, recently I had this list of in this box, you get this list of things to do. Like do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And you go to in any practice, you can get to this place where you're doing things, and that your heart is not engaged in the doing. And you're doing it out of some fear. And I had to just sort of step back and say, okay, what do I want to be doing? What is my path? What does this look like for me? And how do I express this? Not in a checklist if I must do this every day and I don't feel it. And what I want to do that I don't feel, how do I use this personal relationship to say, Krishna, help me feel the things, help me have a desire for these things. So I still find, there's a story about, I think it's in the journey within, and about this, the two birds on the tree, right? And one of the birds is ourself, and we are looking at the tree and looking at all the fruit, and this one's a little sour and this one's a little sweet, and we're looking for it, looking, the other bird's just looking at us, just waiting for us to turn, but not just, in my mind, not just turn and look, but turn and interact, turn and engage, turn and connect to. And so for 4 years, I was somewhat distant from this Lucumi practice. I took a step away as I dove into trying to understand Krishna Bhakti, this cherry, trying to understand it more. And then, this is the part, Rukmini, that's new to you. I think this is what I'm going to say now is, I think, the newer part to you. So then I got a call from one of my Lucumi students about 4 years ago, asking me to come help her do something. And I was like, I hadn't done anything for 4 years. And for whatever reasons, I felt like, okay, I'm going to go do this thing. But I'm going to take all these books and other things that I have because I'm not really practicing this. I'm going to go give them back to her. So off I go to give them back to her. And I'm rifling through one of them, which is a book that we put together when my spiritual teacher's teacher left his body in 1993, and he had written a lot of things, and we put it together into a pamphlet. And he was also a priest of Oshun, so he was also about community and also about love and also about. And when I opened it to talk to her, I opened to this section where he was talking about how we were losing in Lucumi, we were losing our focus on God. I was like, it's 30 years. How did I never see this? How did I never see that he was 30 years ago talking about this? And everything, in every article in that, he was talking about God and about the relationship, our relationship to God, and Arisha's relationship to God, and our relationship as a whole, and our relationship to each other. And I hadn't seen it. I just hadn't seen it. It's really fascinating. And that is the first thing I opened up to, Krishna, of course. Again, designing every little thing of this path. And so, and he was talking about how Olodumare God was no longer the topic of our conversations. We'd come together and everything was about Orishas, or it was about us. It's about people. And throughout his writings, he talks about God. He was clearly always remembering God and never forgetting God. He left his body in 1993, so I didn't get to experience that as much, right? And what that looked like for him. So, so I missed that point, and I think many in that practice were missing that point. One of the beliefs I've clung to since childhood is that God gives each of us a way to approach. So this was my challenge with the sense that if you didn't approach through Jesus, then you weren't going to make it. But that God is benevolent, that God wants each of us to return, and therefore gives us a gazillion different ways. You don't like this way, that's fine. You take this way. You don't like that way, take that way. Just find a way to always remember God and never forget God. And that God is like the sun. We have different names. Depending where you live, you might call the sun something different, and you might even have different experiences of the sun, right? If you live on the equator, your experience of the sun is very different than if you live in Norway. And yet, it is the same entity, right? And so I've been contemplating now, what does Lucumi Bhakti look like? What does Bhakti look like in this spiritual tradition that Krishna brought me to 33 years ago, and which I was, 33 years ago. It's actually the 33rd year of my anniversary of that initiation. It was in January of this past year. So, and so I've been having conversations with people about God, about service to God, about how the ways in which, and often when having these conversations with people, we're in the midst of serving. So helping people to elevate, or to, in my mind, sort of push through the service to each other and service to the Orishas, which is ultimately service to God, and to see it as service to God. And people are eager to engage in the conversation. So whereas my teacher 33 years ago was saying that people aren't talking about God, what I'm trying to do is find ways to have people talking and thinking about God. And just yesterday, the student who called me out 4 years ago was on the phone with me, and she was talking about something she was doing and how they were talking about God. I was like, thank you, Krishna. This is like, I think I said to Rukmini years ago, I don't know, I grew up in New York. Hare Krishnas were here. Like, I could have become a Hare Krishna back in the 90s. Like, that could have been my path, but that was not the path that Krishna had me on. He had me on a very different path. And so trying to understand why that's the path he had me on versus this. And when I am able to see people bringing God back into having conversations about, and I'm like, okay, this is it. The other thing that Bhakti brings to my Lucumi practice is this concept of the false ego. Human beings spend a whole lot of time attached to how we think of ourselves, and we're very, very easy to disrespect. Very, very easy to feel disrespected. And so Lucumi has brought the concept of the false ego and what is our true self, and humility that's exemplified in that verse of the Shikshastakam. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than a straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord. And my teacher, Radhanath Swami, also says that is actually one of his favorite verses. And he says, if we actually understood, we become deeply humble with an eagerness to serve with no selfish motivation. That is knowledge, that is realization. That's the purpose of learning. And he says that we would all be humble if we understood if we saw and understood that everything that we have, that all the talents we have, all the capabilities we have, all the gifts that we have are actually come to us from God. They aren't ours. We have there's nothing to be proud about. They're not ours and can disappear, and people see them disappear. Either through, they disappear through illness, they disappear through mental issues, they've disappeared all different kinds of ways. They are temporary. So this teacher from third of the pamphlet also was emphasizing humility in his writing, and it was that the practice was built on humility, and yet my sense is that humility is not the center of that community. So and humility and service are kind of, they're not words that people love nowadays. Right? They're sort of, it's like to be a servant is seen as being sort of lowly, and being humble is seen as being, a doormat. And so this lofty bhakti goal of being the servant of the servant of the servant. And so I'm looking at how can I bring, how does this concept, which this teacher also touched on, how do I bring this back into a community that is very ego focused, that's very body centric, that's organized around, who am I and what do I know and what have I done? What have I done, as opposed to what has done through me, or what has this and so recently you may know that the Bhakti Center has community groups, which are groups of people that read books and talk. And I have recently led a community group. It was a beginning Bhakti, and we were reading The Journey Within by Radhanath Swami. And one of the things I love about that book is that he goes to great lengths to paint bhakti through a non-sectarian lens. He makes connections through other spiritual practices throughout the book. And so as I was reading it this time, and I've read it several times, and I've used it as a guide for community groups several times, I've been thinking about what does Lucumi Bhakti look like, and can I sort of use the journey within as a sort of foundation to say, I go through each chapter and say, what does this look like through a Lucumi lens? Because I believe that it's doable, right? So this is how I have the cherry on the cake. I think that to me, this is like the ultimate cherry and cake, is to figure out what does this gift that my spiritual teacher has given me through something as, and actually the same student also has The Journey Within on her shelf. I don't think I gave it to her. I don't know how she got it. I don't know if she's read it. But I am thinking that I want to actually take her and her students through the book together and see what comes from that. So and I'm also now reading one of my very first books from this tradition, which is called Olodumare, God in Yoruba Belief. And it was the first book I ever read. Before I read books around the Orishas, I read this book about God through the Yoruba lens. And so I'm going back to that. And so how do I, and because that's another way of bringing it back to within this practice, within this Lucumi practice, is that that's one of their texts that people don't read and people don't talk about. So trying to find ways to help people remember God and never forget God. So when I look back on this road, I can see Krishna's hand orchestrating my steps, just knitting together this reality that moves me here and there. I feel like I'm making choices, but but I'm still walking. I can step back and see this path. And I can see what my reasons were when I first did that initiation 23 years ago. I had my own reasons for doing it. My reasons were very short-sighted, and probably 5 years in, I understood that those reasons were short-sighted. But the reality is, I needed to make that step. And it didn't really matter what my reasons were at that time, whatever it took to help to keep me moving forward. So I can see how his hand sort of intricately weaves these situations in my life. And this is, and for me, and I was talking to Rukmini and Andrea about this before we began, that is one of this core beliefs that I have, which is that Krishna is very present in our life, and very, and not some, I'm too busy for you kind of God, but I can be in everyone's life in the minute details like that. Like what a sense of God that is. Like there's how many billions of us, and that's just the people, right? Of all the living entities can be completely, not just completely involved, completely creating. I was talking to someone doing reception, and I was telling her a story that I heard from Gorgopal. He told a story about porcupines in Siberia. This is the story he told. I looked it up. There aren't porcupines in Siberia, but it was a great story. And the story was that porcupines, when they're cold, they like huddle together. But the challenge when they huddle together is that they're porcupines. And so when they huddle together, they kind of like, they poke each other, right? So they move away. But in Siberia, it's freezing. So you either going to be alone and out there in the cold, or you come closer and you are able to, and you get a little poked, right? So you have to come to terms with that you're going to get poked a little bit by the other people that you're in community with. So I told this person this story, and she was like, I just watched this thing about porcupines. So Krishna's having a whole conversation with her about this, that I somehow dropped this story in the midst of. And it's like this ability, his ability to just like put these little pieces together that help us to sort of to move forward, intricately weaving the situations of our life, so personal to be in detail orientedly involved in our lives. So I'm exploring how to have my cake and eat it too, with all the cherries on top. I don't know where I am on time, Andrea.
You are right on time, actually. As the person
That
who
too is
gave me the
Krishna.
time a long time ago. Oh my goodness. Yeah, no, you're right on time. Thank you so much, Brajarani, for sharing that journey. The chat was going crazy with a lot of these realizations. And there's some Vaishnavis that have to leave early, and they're asking like, how can I listen to the rest of this later? So just as an FYI for those who maybe are not following in the chat, if you do have to leave early, this is being recorded and it will be shared on Rukmini Walker's YouTube. So if you look on the chat, I've placed the link there. So don't worry, you won't miss out on more of Brajarani that way. But right now actually is our perfect timing. So right now is when we are going to go into our breakout groups. And this is a time when we get to spend some more one-on-one time together. We're going to do groups of like looks like maybe 2 or 3. It doesn't look like there's that many of us here. And Brajarani has a really beautiful breakout question for us to talk about in our groups. And I just want to share it before I pause the recording for those who will be hearing the recording in case they want to kind of talk to whoever they can about it. So the breakout question is the hand of God orchestrating our lives. What has Krishna used to draw you closer? And I've put it in the chat, and I'll put it in the description for the video as well, but now I'm going to pause it. Oh, unless you want me to go. Wait,
Can I say something?
Yes,
I think that there's something missing, right? So it's actually two questions.
Oh,
One
I didn't
is,
get the other one in the email, sorry.
No, it looks like those 2 sentences are actually separate from each other.
Oh, Okay.
So one is, so because they're related to each other, but maybe not necessarily exactly the same. So
Mhm.
one is, how have we seen God orchestrating, being the orchestrator of our
Okay.
lives, which may or may not be the same as what has Krishna used to draw us closer, where I was talking about this distress piece of it. So like they're related, but not exactly the same. So.
Okay. So just to modify, so how have we seen God being the orchestrator of our lives? And what has Krishna used to draw you together? Are the questions that we're going to be coming together to talk about. So let me just pause the room. And we are ready for folks to share any realizations, anything from your breakout groups that you really feel called to share. Rukmini, would you mind starting us off? Just because that always helps getting people started if you feel up to it.
Yeah, I was thinking so much. We had a lovely breakout group. I was with Emily and with Chitralake. I had never met either one of them before. Emily's in cold, cold Canada, and Chitralake is in warm, warm Colombia. And it's just so interesting how each of us, we have these intersections in our lives when Krishna is trying to pull us closer. I was thinking so much when Brajarani, when you were speaking about, I was thinking about how Lord Chaitanya has these tricks to catch the people who are running away, which, is all of us, the people in the Western countries, or people who speak a different language, or people who are, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's about the impersonalist trying to run away. So he has to think of all these tricks to catch the people who are running away. So, Brajarani, I just love the way that you're figuring out how to put bhakti in the framework of a language of this community, so that they can hear bhakti in words that they can relate to. And I think that's a task for all of us, to try to find words to communicate bhakti to the people in our lives, the kids. Like Emily, you were saying you have 3 kids. So, to the kids and to our god sisters, to people who are suffering, Chitralake, anything you want to say about your situation? Or Emily, or anybody, like, how do we find the words? How do we find the pathway to put that cherry on top of people's hearts, the cherry that we're all looking for, right? And I love that Brajarani said, I still have the cake, but I have the cherry on top. I love that. So just an invitation, anybody who wants to share.
Yes, for me, this was a very beautiful moment. I've been wanting to meet Rukmini for very long, and I be there with her. So this was one of the ways I see Krishna's hands like moving all, because I'm in Colombia right now. I don't live here. I live in Mexico, but I'm here because of a very difficult situation. My father is in a very delicate health condition. So, Rukmini encouraged me to find ways, because he's in a lot of distress, like mainly like mental distress. And I got a sentence that I liked a lot that says, Rukmini said it to me, the longest journey you'll take, I don't know if it was like word by word, but it's something like, the longest journey you'll take, it's from the heart, the head to the heart.
Yeah.
So, trying to find ways that encourage my father to surrender control, to see Krishna's hands also moving his life. This was more like an invitation for me, like trying to use my resources, my intelligence, whatever Krishna gave me, to try to give him some spiritual relief, not trying to control, because once again, Krishna is the only controller, but like, I don't know, finding any way I can put him in touch with spirituality. Thank you so much.
Nice.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Chitralika. And does anybody else have any realizations? Oh, I see Gail has her hand up, and Stephanie. So we'll start with Gail, and then we'll go to you, Stephanie. Gail, go ahead.
Well, it's not really a realization, but I'm just so excited when I heard that Chitralika is in Colombia, because I and that she doesn't even live here. But I definitely don't live here, and I never travel. But I'm in Colombia right now too. So I said, Krishna must have something to do with that. I'm in Cali. I don't know what part she's in, but yeah. But I just had to say that because I can't text, so it would have been the whole class would have been over by the time I got it all out there. So I said,
No
let
worries,
me
Gail.
just
Thank
say
you
it.
so much for sharing that, how Krishna is perfectly arranging for two Vaishnavis to join in from Colombia who don't even know each other. That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Gail. And Stephanie, would you like to share?
Yeah, so Citruleka, I can amazingly relate in incredible ways because I am going through a very similar experience right now. And what is truly unbelievable to me is that 2 months ago, through the grace of Rukmini, I was able to break free from overly serving the community to being able to receive service through the ISKCON temple here, so that now I can turn my full attention to serving my parents and my father as he starts into a phase 1 clinical trial for his cancer. And so the opportunity to shift that over is truly amazing. And then on Tuesday, I had a patient that was basically understanding of his health situation. And he said something very interesting to me. He said that he realized he was in his 9th inning of the ball game. And that helped me to realize that with my dad, we're in extra innings. It's all exciting. It's all a blessing. Every pitch is a blessing to be able to spend with him and to be able to share the pure joy and the happiness that is coming through me through all of these different podcasts and amazing things. Association has been incredible in opening me up to my voice and my joy that I hope to be able to spread for whatever time I have with them.
Thank you so much for sharing that,
Thank you.
Stephanie.
So beautiful, so beautiful. What else? What else?
Does anybody else?
Emily had,
I think Brajarani wants to share as well.
and Emily.
Yeah. And
Well,
then
please
also
let Emily, please let Emily share first.
where's Emily? I don't see her.
With the
Emily,
green.
she's great. And Karen also has her hand up.
So Emily, if you just unmute yourself and then we'll go to Karen next. There you
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Haribol. Well, I just wanted to say thank you so much to Brajarani for sharing your journey and your experience. And actually, this is the first time that how would I say this? So I in our breakout group, I described how I had some strong involvement and association with devotees in my 20s, and then I moved away and I ran away, so to speak. But it was always looking at spiritual content, if you will. And I just want to say that the chants to the Orishas that I would listen to on YouTube, specifically the ones to Yemaya and Oshun, I would have the same feelings of kirtan, that heart opening and crying at times, and just the devotion there. And I'm so excited for you and for your students and your peers, etc. Yeah, I don't know what I'm trying to say exactly, but I just that those chants helped me a lot in my journey. And now I'm coming back more to Bhakti with not so much the feeling that I cannot meet the expectations or the rules and regulations of Bhakti, but that I want to be involved, and it will look the way it looks and it will be the way it is, rather than a very small box to try to mold myself into. So it feels more real now.
Yeah.
It was real then. It's always been real, you know. Even trying to read autobiography of a yogi and trying to figure things out as a teenager, you know. And it's just, anyways, it's just beautiful. Nice to hear others' journeys as well. So just thank you. That's all I really want to say.
Thank you so much, Emily, for sharing. You know, I think this is, you know, these paths that Krishna has us on, you know, bringing us, I mean, and sometimes it feels like it's going away, right? But it sounds like an essential step to get back to something more authentic, to get back to being able to actually live bhakti in a way that feels like it really makes sense to you and that you connect to and that you can talk to other people about because it's real for you. It's not just something that I'm doing. And I think we all have to, you know, find that place. And so that's getting out there and still holding you by giving you these mothers to hold you, right? And at the same time, you know, letting you go out a little bit and drawing you back in and go. It's not a straight road for most of us. For most of us, not. For some of us, like Ajay Rukmini, probably much a straighter road, but for many of us, it's like the winding river to me.
And Karen, would you like to unmute yourself and go next, please?
Thank you, Brajarani.
Thank you. I'm happy to finally be here. I've been following on the WhatsApp for probably 2 years or something. But anyways, I guess I had the realization while I was sharing with my group that that it's sort of like I think that Krishna sort of orchestrated some kind of separation to draw me back in, and just like I had a really hard time, and I was explaining that I just a couple years after I sort of discovered bhakti and was going to lots of kirtans and chanting and having a really wonderful life, and then I met a man, and then it got a little rocky, and then I got pregnant, and then I would still go to the Bhakti Center, but like he was a Roman Catholic, which he always made a point to tell me. And so I sort of like stepped back. I didn't, I went, like he would travel for business. I would go to the Bhakti Center when he was away, and I didn't really talk much about it. I sort of hid my little things that I sort of like a little secret altar or something. And and then I went to Switzerland, had another baby because of his work, and things got really bad. He was drinking a lot. It was a very messy situation. And I was really depressed with like postpartum depression and feeling disconnected from my community. And then the drinking and my mother had a really kind of heartbreaking diagnosis in the fall. And I came back to the US and went back to Switzerland and said, I want to be home. I want to move home. And it turned into a really rocky 3 months of really like lots of drinking and difficult things. But I started going to the temple there in Zurich almost every week with my kids. I started chanting again, and everything got better. And then he had a really dramatic episode, and then he's been sober since. And things like, I'm now in New Hampshire, he's in Switzerland. He wants us to be together, but I'm like kind of okay here. I want to be with my mother, and things are going really well in a lot of ways. I mean, despite all of the drama and everything, he's actually now probably at the temple in Zurich right this moment, and he's sort of taken an interest. And in the morning, we all chant around together with our beads and over like Zoom or whatever, and it's just interesting. He's booked a bhakti retreat in Switzerland for July. And so I don't know, it's just like I'm in a little bit of I'm not sure where everything's going. I don't know where my kids are going to school. I don't know what I'm doing exactly, but it feels like for the most part, things that seemed really scary and crazy are now taking a positive direction. And it's sort of like I've been led back in this crisis, I guess. So.
Wow, that's amazing, Karen. Thank you so much for sharing that. That really goes to show that you can't ever predict how Krishna is going to arrange things. And please take a look in the chat, because our dear Kamaniya is in Switzerland. So,
I just wanted to connect with her.
Yeah, she wanted to connect with you. Yeah, it does. We have maybe like 5 more minutes if anybody has any realizations. Also, if you have any questions for Brajarani, this is a good time to ask as well. So we'd be happy to connect, and just take a look at the chat. Before while folks are deciding if they're going to feel comfortable speaking, I just want to remind everyone that we do have ways for you to continue connecting with Vaishnavis outside of Urban Devi Sangha once a month. So I'm going to put that in the chat. We have 2 WhatsApp groups. One is an announcement only, and one is a discussion group. So the discussion group is a little bit more active. So if you get overwhelmed with lots of messages, you might want to stick to announcements only. And either way, we'd be happy to have you join us. And then also, if you want to partner with Rukmini, she has a Patreon that you can join, as well as Facebook. And we also will be posting, as I said, this recording on YouTube. So you could join Rukmini on YouTube to watch videos there. So does anybody have any other questions or realizations? Brajarani, did you have something you wanted to share, since it doesn't look like anybody has their hands up?
I can ask Brajarani a question. Brajarani, go ahead, though. You were going to say something.
What I was going to say is I'm like lost in the chat. I'm trying to respond to people and I can't. And I'm like, I don't understand how this chat works. And I was trying to, Kamania, I was trying to respond to you about the TED Talks, and like, I was just lost in the chat just now. So,
but we did have the question from Vaishnavis. They were asking how they could connect with you, Brajarani, after the Sangha.
You can connect with me through Facebook messaging. You can connect with me through, I'm fine if you want to reach out to Andrea or Rukmini and get my number. Where else am I? I'm not often on like Facebook or on Instagram or anything else. I don't have, and everything else is my business. So there's not a Brajarani sort of existence out there in the world. There's a coach business out there in the world. So I think that I think, and Susan and I were talking about this. So I'm constantly looking at the ways in which Krishna just sort of creates things. And Karen's story was just a really sort of great example of that. And Susan was talking about, and even just the fact that Susan and I end up in the group together was like, another just arrangement. He's just constantly arranging things for me. Like he's got nothing better to do but then arrange things for me, but he arranged this for me that I could spend a little time with Susan, and we were talking about being sisters and how even when you're sisters, you still end up having to walk your own path and find your own. He still draws us in an individual kind of way, which is and so she ended up having to go to India. Even though she's Rukmini's sister, she went to India and was scooped up and just really taken care of, and that was her entree, a really deep sort of dive into bhakti. And so he fascinates me. He amuses me. He does a lot of things.
Brajarani, I have a question though, because people get so tripped up on the language, like even like your love for Bhagavad Gita, it's extraordinary, but there's so much terminology in bhakti, so many Sanskrit words. So how are you feeling you're able to communicate that essence of that cherry on top of the cake to the people in this spiritual community that you've been a part of for so long? How are you helping them get past the language? How are you communicating the essence, I guess, is the real question.
I think what's helpful is is trying to follow Radhanath Swami, who I think is a real essence seeker, and he can get very, very complex, and and at the same time I think really boils things down a lot. And I look at this particular community, and I think there are probably like 3 or 4 sort of key things that I think if people could just shift a little bit. One is the sense that I'm not my body, right? It is a community that already believes in reincarnation, but doesn't really have a sense about how you stop. And it believes in reincarnation, but doesn't go much further than that. And so if we can get less ego-oriented, less false ego-oriented. So I've really, I think, just chosen a couple of key things, really boiling it down to love, service, devotion, and and being able to see God in each other, and therefore not so easy to disrespect. So those are the ones that I'm sort of key talking with people about. We'll see what comes after that, but to me, I'm really trying to just sort of be at the heart of it. And there's enough conversation to have around that, and as it is. But great question, thank you. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, so helpful. Andrea, should I go ahead and mention next month?
Yes, please. I was gonna say, we want to make sure to mention it before anybody else has to leave early.
Okay, so our next Urban Devi, if you can please mark your calendars, it's April 16th. And we're going to be hearing from Urmila, who's written a new book called Career Dharma. And it's about 9 principles that can work for you to move toward having a satisfying career that is the best expression of your own self. And if you're not sure what your nature is, how to find a matching career where your work is your dharma. So that's a really interesting book that she's done. She's partnering with someone named Rukmini. Her name is Rukmini also. So we'll hear from her next month on April 16th. So please mark your calendars. Please join the Urban Devi WhatsApp group so that you can get all the announcements. And it's been wonderful being with all of you today. Thank you so much. Kamania, you have your hand up.
I hope your voice gets better soon, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this amazing Sangha. Just a quick question about the next session. Would the focus be on career, or would we also find value from attending if we're not looking for a career? Would we be able to also sort of apply it inwardly or personally? And
yeah, I think so, because it's about going deeper into your own dharma.
Okay.
So, and she's a brilliant teacher. She's been a teacher of kids. She's led schools. She has a PhD in education. So I think going deeper in our own dharma, maybe if we, like your dharma is leading kirtan. So I think it'll be helpful for all of us. So please.
Not since COVID.
Well, COVID through the airways, right? Purifying the airways. But yeah, please join us. Mark your calendars, April 16th. And wonderful to be here with all of you today. Thank you all so much for joining.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone. So if we didn't get to your questions or your realizations, remember you can share it in our WhatsApp groups so that we can continue the conversation, just because we want to honor everybody's time, and it is getting close to 12:30. So before I close the Zoom, just please check out the chat so you can join our WhatsApp groups. You could join us for our next Urban Devi. And remember that if you want to continue this conversation in the WhatsApp or with Rukmini and Patreon, please do so. And Brajarani, if you want to reach out to her, you can always reach out to me or to Rukmini on the WhatsApp, and then we'll get you in contact with her. So thank you so much, Vaishnavis. Hope that you have a blessed rest of your month until we see you in a month. Haribo.
Thank you all for joining. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.